It's literally one stroke at a time. And if you can just enjoy the process, that's the best feeling in the world. No matter the placement, no matter the expectation, if you truly love the process and how you're going to get to the finish line, not when, but why and how. And if you define your why and your how, and you get to execute that when you have to, results will take care of themselves.
Welcome to The Other 3 Years, a show for anyone who has an Olympic-sized dream they want to turn into a reality. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Other 3 Years. My name is Kristi Wagner, and I'm so excited to share this week's episode with all of you. I have guest Mary Whipple on this week. So if you don't know, Mary was the long-standing coxswain of the very dominant women's 8 for the U.S. She is a 3-time Olympian, winning 3 medals, 1 silver and 2 gold. She's also a 5-time world champion and just an all-around star. She also founded her company called the Ninth Seat while she was still training, and it provides both coxswains and rowers with resources to help them succeed and advance their athletic careers. She also runs coxswain camps and clinics that are super well attended. I know tons of people that have attended them. So I had a total blast chatting with Mary, and honestly, it was like a sneak peek into why she's such an amazing coxswain. She kept just sort of inspiring me and making me want to race. It was just really fun to talk about her whole journey within the sport from high school to college, and then her time as an elite athlete, and how it's still a really big part of her life, just in a different way. So I hope that everyone is as inspired by Mary as I am. But before we get into that, here's an update on what is currently going on in my training. We are on our last week in Princeton before we head off to Europe for our pre-camp in Italy before we go to Paris. And it's kind of wild, like last little chunk of training. I'm not going to lie, we've definitely been doing a lot of work and I was feeling a little bit tired. So took some good time to recover this weekend, but you know, that recovery really seems to have paid off. So I started this week feeling really good. And we're sort of moving on from our hypoxico tents. We don't have to sleep at altitude anymore, which is very exciting. And yeah, it's just been really fun. Like right before the Olympics is such an exciting time. I feel like everyone is just so excited and there's a lot of hype around it. It's definitely the most famous you ever feel as a rower. Like companies are giving us stuff, which again is not why you do it, but it is pretty cool and exciting. So that's just really fun. I really appreciate all of the friends and family support that we have, but also sort of all of the companies that have been supporting us. And it makes it feel like your hard work is, paying off, which again, it's not really for the stuff, but it is a cool aside. And I just feel really grateful to all of the people that have been giving us support. One of those companies is actually this cookie company based in Albany, but in upstate New York, called Cookie Therapy. And it's actually their last cookie drop. The cookies are really, really good. I've had some, and I am a cookie connoisseur, so I wouldn't lead you in the wrong direction with cookies. This is not like an ad. I just really like these cookies. And they're doing kind of their last drop, so definitely go check out Cookie Therapy and order some cookies, some delicious cookies. And they are doing a special Olympics cookie in support of me and Brightsighted, which is just like so nice. I got to chat with the owner of the company, Faye, and she was so cool. And she was just like, yeah, I love supporting women and women that are doing awesome things, which I also love. So Faye, thank you so much. And if anyone is feeling in the mood for cookies, go check it out. Unfortunately, the cookies are going to ship when we're already in Europe, so I won't get to try any of the special ones. So you'll all have to get them and tell me how they are. But yeah, at the end of this week, we fly over to Europe, and then we just keep the gravy train rolling there. And I actually don't even really know what gravy train means, but I guess what I mean is that we just keep training when we get to Europe, basically. I'm honestly kind of excited to get over there because the distractions just get less and less, and I'm already feeling really zoned in, but I'm excited for kind of that like really, really zoned in time. And then before we know it, it's going to be time to race, which is just so exciting. I'm pumped. It's so exciting. So now it is time for all of you to get really pumped because it's time for my conversation with two-time Olympic gold medalist Mary Whipple. All right, we're recording. Mary, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No problem. I'm a super fan of your podcast ever since you started it because that's the real deal, right? The other 3 years. That's like when you really, really define who you want to be and why you want to race and how you want to race. If you get to race, that one during that final year and hopefully the final race of that final year of the 4 year cycle. So I don't know. It's awesome. Plus, as a super fan, like now as a retired athlete, you crave knowledge of like, what are you guys doing now? What's going on now? What part of, your training cycle are you? Are you tired? Yes. Are you moving the boat well? Are you, like, is momentum on your side? There's all these questions that I think people who've been in the zone and in the training environment, whether you're in the camp, out of the camp, whatever training group you're in, that's the stuff everyone wants to know.
No, totally. And it has been. I mean, it's been such a cool way to connect with, tons of people, but I have like been surprised and just like it's so awesome that a lot of like retired athletes listen, and I think it's been a cool way to connect with people that I like watched growing up, and it's like, wow, you have interest in what I'm doing. That's so insane.
Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, how many practices you do a day? Two or three? If you're counting recovery or anything, up to, 4 all the time. But then, like, think about like that one afternoon or morning you're off from the team and you come back and you think like you've been gone for like a week or a month. You're like, what have you guys been doing? I've been gone for so long, but you really haven't. And so think about us old people now that we're retired and we're not a part of the training group. Yeah, we just want to know, what are you guys doing? How are you doing? All that stuff.
I don't think that you're old.
Why, thank you. Sunscreen, moisturize.
Well, I definitely want to hear all about like coming into retirement and stuff, but I thought it would be awesome to just start with a little bit of your background, how you got involved in the sport, and sort of what the early days were like.
I started rowing, or I've always been a coxswain. I started in the sport way back the summer before high school. So my sister and I have a twin sister, Sarah, Sarah Puttycomb. She and I didn't know what to do the summer before high school, and we thought we were too old to go to, sleepaway camp or summer camps. So my mom decided, or somehow, I have no idea how she thought of this idea, but she was like, well, why don't you go to the aquatic center and maybe learn to row? And as a further background, I grew up in Sacramento, about 15 minutes away from Lake Natoma. And Lake Natoma is, most people have heard of it. They do occasionally NCAAs when the IRA have come out west. They go to Lake Natoma. So every springtime, rowing teams would flood the regatta site, and then, like the old classic spaghetti factories next to it. So my mom was like, hey, go to the aquatic center. So my sister and I, we did a learn to row class, and it was a sculling class. It was, I think, 2 weeks long, maybe 6 total sessions. But during that learn to row program, the high school rowing coach was around, and he saw me and my sister, and there was actually another brother set. So there's 4 of us in high school, and then the rest were, adults. So, but he told us, hey, there's a high school rowing program. It's a club team. You guys should come out. And then he looked at my sister and I, was like, and we're always looking for coxswains, and we're like, what is that? Had no clue what a coxswain was. At that time, we're 13, 14. So we're like, we're going to grow, we're not going to be small forever. But so that was summertime. Novices didn't start. I think the information meeting was in September, October, and the rest was history. We did 4 years at Capital Crew. My sister got recruited to UC Davis, and I got recruited to UW. The very last year, my senior year, that summer before going to UW, I made the junior team. That was a other new crazy story because I had no clue that there was a junior national team. And the only reason why I knew is because one of my teammates in high school, Rachel Brunel, she made the junior team junior year. She came back with a bronze medal from Junior Worlds, and then she told me, their coxswain aging out. And then she's the one who recommended me to that current coach, which was Barb Groot at the time. And Eleanor McIlvain was the assistant coach, and she was the freshman coach at UW. I got an invite to a winter camp, and then I guess I didn't mess up. And so then I got an invite to the selection camp that summer, and I eventually made it. When they first named the team, I was not on it. I was number 2 coxswain, and then we had to do some time trials to prove that we were fast enough. The B boat, I think we were like less than 2 seconds behind the A boat, and so they're like, wait a second, this isn't right. And what I completely remember was like when my name wasn't called, of course I was devastated. And then I had a really good meeting with, the 2 coaches, Barb and Eleanor. Don't remember what we said, but I remember how I felt when I left that meeting, and I felt like satisfied, but I also felt a little, chippy on my shoulder, being like, just watch, like if I'm going to be the B boat, watch out. And I think that was a huge lesson that I learned, and what I tell my coxswain students through my company Ninth Seed is, it's no matter what boat you're in, if you can make it the fastest possible, that's the only thing you have control over. And how I felt also leaving that meeting was I felt like I didn't want to say I gave the coaches doubt, but I think I planted the seed.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't bitter. I was motivated to make my boat as fast as possible. And I was excited to have the lineup that I had. So I was like, awesome. Like, I'm stoked. And so I think they saw that in the B boat. And so then the next day, they were like, hey, the boats aren't fast. Like, the separation between the boats aren't as what we want it to be. We're going to make a switch. And it was just the coxswains. So I got, I guess, a seat race. But here's where it's a little shady now that I know what I know now, being a coach and stuff. I mean, it was opportunity, right? But then it was also side by side. So it completely gave me a really great advantage, but I took it. But how I led like the pre-race meeting, how I like kind of, was like, okay, guys, this is me. Hi. Told them like, what we're going to do it, how we're going to do it, and kind of just gave them more direction. Then, of course, then they talked about me being out of the room, and the girls eventually picked me over the other coxswain. But I guess that's my biggest piece of advice to athletes who don't get the boat that they want in the beginning. Stay curious, stay in the process. And I think the process of me trying to find more speed and trying to, organize everybody to get more speed no matter what circumstance, that's what you have control over. And if you enjoy that process, then, it doesn't really matter what boat you're in, because you're going to go as fast as possible within that combination.
No, I mean, and that's true for rowers as well. Like, make the boat that you're in fast. And
Oh, yeah.
I always tried to think about it as like, you want to be the person that when other people like hear that you're in their boat, they're excited. And when they're in another boat, they're scared. Like, that's the kind of person that you want to be in. I think that's true for rowers or coxswains, right?
100%.
When you first started coxing, like, that's obviously pretty different than sculling, like a learn to row. I mean, obviously the same sport, but what did you enjoy about coxing specifically at the beginning?
Well, first, not gonna lie, I was bummed. They humored us in the high school level, meaning that it was a big club team and they had a barge for all the novices, so they let everybody row. Then the reality hit where they did the classic height line, and then they were assigning people port starboard, and then they got to the end and they're like trying to sell it on us, like, you guys are going to be awesome coxswains. And I just remember talking to my sister being like, so wait, we don't get to row? We just get to sit there? Like, I was kind of disappointed. I thought, it was like the glorified equipment manager. But what I really did like, and it came natural, was just boat maneuverability, which I heavily teach and am a huge proponent of. If you've got coxswains, doesn't matter what they say in the beginning, you've got to give them the confidence of how to maneuver their boat. Notice I'm not saying how to steer straight, like how to maneuver the boat. Like how do you turn? How do you dock? How do you get parallel? Just like boatmanship. And so that always just made sense to me. And steering straight is actually just another proponent of boat maneuverability. It just becomes natural because then your whole awareness of what's in front of you, sideways, where you are physically, where you need to end up, and all the points in between, it just becomes natural. That was the cool thing. I got to drive a boat with, a human powered machine. The next thing that made it okay for me to be a coxswain was being competitive and wanting to go as fast as possible. I'm like, physically, I will never make the fast boats, but as a coxswain, I can be in the fastest boat. And then how to problem solve and how to make your boat faster by offering solutions and just, identifying all those technical problems and just how to validate the process. That was cool because I knew my decisions and how I offered the solutions, the feeling of the boat being better and being faster. That was like pure validation and just addicting of like, I figured it out and everyone bought in. Having that trust, having people see value of you just quote sitting there, that part I think made me really, really love this sport and why I still love this sport and why I love teaching this to other coxswains, because just to see their, eyes light up about, oh, I don't have to be motivational. I don't have to be someone who I'm not. I don't have to be the hype person. I just need to
Mm-hmm.
know how to increase boat speed and be a part of the process. And that is the motivating aspect of it.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I never like have a coxswain now, and I feel like I took them for granted like so much. It just is really incredible. Like it's hard to maneuver a single or a double. Like an 8 is a really large boat to maneuver, and I feel like you can just really tell when people are confident in what they're doing, and then that like leads to everyone in the boat just being relaxed, because I'd say like safety is also a huge concern, right? Or that you're like in charge of the safety of all of the people in the boat. It's sort of a thankless job almost, because when you're doing a really good job, it's just like expected. And so I try now to, give kudos more to the coxswains. Like, you guys are crushing it.
In front of the rowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, in front of the rowers. A lot of my coaches, growing up always would take the time to say that in front of the rowers of like, you've got a really good coxswain, like you're lucky.
So then Washington, what was that like?
Oh, being a husky is all time because my novice coach, Eleanor McIlvain, taught the freshmen what it is to be relentless, to lean into the process, to love the process. And then being coached by Jan Harville, I mean, icon, a full-on icon. She taught me, this might sound weird, how to take the emotion out of the process, if that makes sense, on a coaching point of view of if you trust the process of trying to find the fastest lineup, at the end of the day, you almost have to turn your humanity off and just trust the results and trust the process. She was never afraid to unturn every single stone, but then she was also not afraid to leave the stones in place if she knew it was the right group, but just they needed more time with each other. So yeah, it was an art. She was amazing. And then bottom line, being there at the right time, right place with all the team and all the athletes, like Washington taught me to win. What they taught me to go to the line completely sure of our race plan is going to work and just the information I give the team within our plan, it's plan A all the way. Like there's no audibles, there's no change. There's just if you're not winning, why? What's going on in the boat? Are we decelerating? Is somebody else going faster? How can we maximize our plan? And what information do I need to tell them? So yeah, it was a seamless transition from Washington to the national team because unbeknownst to me, she was running the squad like a full-on classic national team practice with like the tempo and expectation and everything. So yeah, they totally got me ready. And it's not a coincidence that after me came Caitlin, and after Caitlin, now it's Nina. And then on the men's side, with Riley and Sam before that, like it is Cox and you, because how they utilize the coxswains, how they use it as complete pure middle management and how we're part of the process. It's just we get how to run efficient practices, and we know we practice to win, and we practice how we want to win in practice. So when you are going to the national team, it's easy. And UW Coxswains spend a lot of time in the launch just watching small boats, because they do a lot of small boats. So it's a seamless transition of like right in the launch, and then getting plugged into the eight, and you gotta deliver, and you gotta run the show like you haven't, not been in a boat for a week.
I was gonna ask about the coxswain like lineage, sort of. I mean, that's pretty
Oh,
incredible.
and I forgot Betsy Beard. Yeah, I forgot Betsy Beard back in the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you guys talked about it?
No, we should. But I mean, I guess that's like another thing about UW. There's so many Olympians, in the alumni database, that it's much bigger than just our little coxswain squad. But yeah, it is pretty cool. I mean, when we see each other at gatherings, we always tend to gravitate toward each other, and it's like it's a cool club to be in.
Definitely. You mentioned, the transition being like pretty seamless, UW to the national team. At what point did you sort of think like this is something that I could do, and this is like an ambition that I have?
So after making the junior team, going into college, I thought, whoa, maybe I could make the national team one day. And at that point, U23s, they didn't have a U23 championship. It was a Nations Cup, and it was only a straight four. So for, the developing coxswain, was really nothing. But I remember thinking, if I can't make the varsity eight at UW, then I probably won't make a national team. That was my first checkpoint. And for UW at the time, we still had freshmen be freshmen. So we were on the novice team freshman year. So I was like, okay, sophomore year is my first shot. If I can make the varsity eight my sophomore year, then maybe I am good at this. And so then I did. But that was year 2000. So that was the Sydney Olympics. So then, like the next year, I remember going into a meeting with my coach, Jan Harville, who's an Olympian too from the 80s. And I was like, hey, I've got a goal. And I asked her, I was like, do you think I have a shot at going to selection? This was my junior year. And she looked at me and she said, absolutely. And it was so empowering being like, whoa, Jan Harville thinks I could go to selection camp. And it was like a whole new regime. That was Tom's new year. But I remember applying. And again, it was like pre-digital. I'm a fossil in terms of digital age. And I had to write a cover letter and then have a resume and then coach's rec. So I had to apply. And I remember coming into my coach being like, hey, this is my cover letter. And it was the typical, like, I would be honored to have the chance to just be considered. It was all these, like, fluffy statements. And my coach, Jan, she looked at me and she's like, do you want to go to camp, right? I'm like, well, yes. And she's like, and you want to make the eight? And I said, well, yeah, that would be awesome. She's like, then you need to absolutely state that. You need to say you want to get invited, you want to make the eight, you want to go to Worlds, and just making these what I thought was egotistical statements. I'm like, I don't want to, be, considered cocky. And she's like, no, you're not being cocky. You're just stating your goal and your intention. And that was exactly what I needed in my head, because when I got the invite to camp, we had five coxswains, and only one of them was going to leave Ithaca to go to Princeton. And it was like the who's who. It was the junior team coxswain who aged up before I got it, the coxswain after I had it, all like junior team coxswains, all D1, and then like an older coxswain. So there was like 5 of us total. I just had a mental edge because I remember we were all very friendly with each other, which was super cool. And I remember being like on the dock after we all like went for a jog or something, and one of the coxswains said something like, "Well, we're probably too young to go on to Princeton." And I just kind of kept my mouth shut a little bit. I was like, "Too young?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know what they're thinking. Like I'm here to make the eight." And I just knew like, boom, bingo. Like I've got the advantage because I could already see myself and I'm doing everything that, Tom told us to do, like steer straight. Second thing to do, steer straight. Third thing, steer straight. Bingo. That's all I have to do. So I just listened, I counted, I started, I stopped, and I just steered straight. Yeah. Yeah. So I made it. Well, to the second round to Princeton.
That's awesome. So that was before your senior year.
Yeah. That's 2001.
2001. So then you had 2 full years out before the first Olympics.
Yeah, because I made the team in '01 and '02.
'02.
Yeah.
When you were in that first quadrennial, did you think that you were going to be doing this for the next decade of your life? Or did you kind of think it was just like a experience for then?
Well, first, I was just thinking make the boat every year because I knew like the longer you're in it, the harder it is for another coxswain to come in and take the seat. But
Mm-hmm.
then I also remember it must have been maybe after '02. I remember being in Lucerne and we were like chat like me and my other teammate Kate Johnson, we were chatting with Mike Tatey and he was like, we were just like peppering him with questions about back in the day, and when you get Tatey talking, it's the best thing in the world because he just has stories upon stories. But then we also were asking him about like the health of the team and in terms of, longevity and, like why, especially like on the women's side, we're like, man, like at that point, the women's eight hadn't medaled in 20 years. And we were just being like, okay, how are we going to crack this nut? If we do make it to the '04 boat. And he was the one who kind of planted the seed about like, everyone just goes 4 years and they're done. So you have to, like almost restart the group. So it was kind of like, wow, like, all right. I didn't think I was going to keep going. I don't know. But as soon as we crossed the finish line in '04, I was like, oh, sign me up for another 4 years. It was a phenomenal race. And it was the grittiest, rawest, like, I'm super proud of my teammates for not unraveling when the lead was, like Romania was working through us and we were just digging in. But I also knew, I was like, what if? Like, what if we just didn't slow down? How do we learn how to not slow down? I was thinking, oh my gosh, we had no clue what we were doing in '04. I had no clue in '04. I just thought like, oh, I'll just yell louder, yell harder. Well, we want it more. But in terms of really being a student of sport and really knowing, okay, like we beat ourselves up in the first 1,000 because we just went full throttle, aggro, emotional. And then of course, like we dug into the third 500, but physiologically, like if you're not technically savvy, which I mean, we were, but in terms of where we could have been, I think we could have been smarter technically, but it was where we were and it was the best we've ever been. And we, stopped the drought and we got that silver. We threw everything into that second 1,000 and everything into that last 300. Like, yeah, it was pure raw. It was pure emotion. It was awesome. So as soon as I finished, I was like, what if? Like we just slowed down. They didn't slow down. They didn't speed up. They just didn't slow down as much as we did. Like how? And so that was my conundrum. That was the nut I needed to crack. Because in '05, dude, we were like winning the world. We were winning worlds in Gifu until the last 300. 3 boats passed us. We just like the tranny broke. Like we just dropped like the muffler, like everything, like something blew. Like we blew up which is great because like we sold it. And I remember talking to Tom, and I was just like, why are we slowing down with 750 to go? Like what are we doing? And I just remember the next 3 years, the last half of practice, what could I start messaging? What can we do? Like the third piece of whatever, 1,000 repeat or something, like whatever was like the suffer point of practice. It was always that little plug of like third 500, like last 750. This is where like we need to push through here. How are we going to hold our integrity? How are we going to hold our speed? How are we going to hold our leverage so we just don't slow down? And then, of course, we didn't, which was great. We figured it out. That first 1,000, you got to be in it. But at one point, it has to be enough. And I'm not saying like settle, and I'm not saying be complacent, but you've got to be that, it has to be comfortably uncomfortable. It has to be in that sweet spot. So then when you do go into that third 500, you do go into that second 1,000, you dial it up a little bit because that's when the real race starts. That's, I guess, my little piece of advice is, you've got to be who you are, but you also have to know what true, like unsustainable, sustainable speed, what does that feel like in practice? And then when all the adrenaline, all the chaos, all the other competition is throwing those Hail Marys in the first 1,000, can you control your breathing? Can you control that anxiousness? And can you get anchored into that rhythm and that feeling? Just listen to the boat, feel the boat, listen to the boat, because that's gonna like hold that gravity of being so chaotic in the first 1,000, first 500 of an Olympic final. But then you also be like, check, first 500, second 500. Now it's time to go. And that whole last 1,000, you just got to keep cranking. It's a whole big old, it's just a crescendo to just annihilation, which is great. It's a beautiful feeling when you're just like totally going bonkers, but when you make that transition to your base, it's just like putting on your favorite pair of pants, and you're like, oh, this feels good. Like, let's do this. Let's get to work.
Yeah, I feel like Yosi says the same thing. Like in the second 1,000, you're rowing a pace that's unsustainable for everybody else to keep up with.
For sure. And that was the thing. Like in that first 500 or that first 1,000, you're almost like egging people on. Like, oh, yeah, come with us. You don't know reality until that third 500 because we're just cruising. Like, so if you're going to be coming with us, you better be prepared to dial it up because the whole like second 1,000, that's good. But also, we have to talk about the first 300 meters. You have to be present because that's when you're like, you're totally going to be rowing on pure adrenaline. And if you don't make yourself feel every single stroke and every like the development of every single stroke in the first 300 and in the first 400, the first 600, you got to be present. And that's what we talked a lot about in our '08 boat and our 12 boat. We just need to be present and feel it. Because if you are just completely dialed in to what your shell needs, what the development of the drive needs, it's pure speed you're building. And it's not just, chasing, gripping, go, 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 which is a fine line because, other people who don't have that pure speed, oh, they're going to dial it up to an 11 in that first 600 meters. And so you don't want to freak out and row their race, but also you need to be in the race. So it's that delicate balance of knowing who you are, knowing what your rhythm, your style, how your boat is going to react, how the feeling of the blade is going to feel, how it's going to sound in your lane. Like that stuff's going to bring you to just be in that moment and be present. And that's the sweet spot. And that's what gives me goosebumps thinking about it. And even after, 10 plus years of that last Olympic final, every time we did first start, first two strokes of the start, first five of the start, like every time we were just practicing how it's going to feel, how we're going to let the bloat develop, how we're going to let the drive develop. And then for me, being that truth stick of the coxswain seat of at the Olympic final, I don't have to tell my teammates to go. I have to tell them to feel, to listen, to breathe, and just reassure them that if we just be who we are and we row how we know that we've hit our gold medal time standards in practice, stick to the plan, slap them around a little bit, tell them we're cool, we're good. That's the magic. Especially when you're calling the stride and you're looking over and you're almost laughing because everybody, the whole of the rest of the world they're still high, but you hit that downshift and you're looking over and we didn't lose an inch, we're still in it, and now we can get to work, and they haven't even breathed yet. That is the money spot of knowing you're gonna win, or you have the opportunity. That window is there because you held on to your identity and you nailed the high strokes down to the transition strokes, and you're looking across, you're feeling the anxiousness of everybody else, but you're anchored, you're centered because you're feeling your blade, you're feeling the acceleration, you're feeling your teammate, you're just, So that's my hope for you, that's my goal for you. Have fun, but if you're feeling like crazy and like the field is going cuckoo, listen to your boat, feel your blade, get to your boat identity, and then you can just get to work. Do you want to race right now? I know.
I do. Yeah, I do. And it's funny. I've been in bow seat for like a long time, and I've been stroking the past few months, and we race at World Cup, and I'm like looking out of the boat the whole time. They're like, you cannot do that anymore.
Why not? As long as you can row your rhythm, why not? Just don't get distracted. No.
Do you have a favorite race?
I have three that stick out. Well, I have four. I have four races that stick out. It's the '08 final, followed by the 2012 final. And then the other two that really stick out as defining moments, it's gonna be so random, but I think it was the 2007 World Championships, so the worlds before the '08 Olympics, because it was the first time we had to answer to Romania. It did not go well. We didn't win our heat. We had to race the rep. In our boat meetings, we even kind of surrendered to the fact maybe winning's not possible. Don't tell us anybody, but we're like, let's just come top five, okay, guys? It wasn't going well. It was not going well. But then it was awesome because off the high strokes, as soon as we hit our stride, we had our mojo back. Forget fifth. We're going to win this. I knew it in my bones. From that first defining moment of the stride, I was like, oh, fifth is out. We're going for gold. And then same kind of scenario, last 300, Romania was making a move. We were 3 seats up and I felt momentum coming, and I looked over and I said, hey, Romania is moving. And before I could make a call about let's, shove our legs harder, it was a collective, all 8 sets of legs shoved unitedly, just had an answer of what, before I even asked. I was like, Romania's on the move. And I was literally going to say what we're going to do about it. But they already, my teammates already answered. And then we took our lift and then we moved back and then we took a seat and a half on the sprint. So that was a huge defining moment. And then my last best race or defining race was Henley 2000 with UW, because it was 3 different lead changes. And it was that kind of same epiphany, giving information to your teammates, having them collectively, unitedly answer. So the impulse was united and not having to make huge calls or intricate calls, just giving them information, they responding, me validating. It was just awesome back and forth, and we won, and it was great. So those 4 are my favorites.
Those are awesome. I was wondering if Henley or something like that was going to be in there, because I feel like that's just such a iconic and truly a coxswain's race, right? Because so much strategy is involved. And
Yeah, it was cool going into 2000 because it was the first year it was not an exhibition race and it was an Olympic year, so none of the top dogs were there. So it was us and you, Vic, for the final. So it was pretty cool being at that point a sophomore in college. And we didn't win NCAAs. We came second because I think another rookie mistake. Not on completely on my part, but just being filled with questions racing during NCAA's, being like, this does not feel like us. And I didn't have the answers of how to like, shake us out of like this weird chasey funk. So it was good to end on a good note.
I don't want to take up a ton more of your time, but I am sort of wondering about like transition away from sport, but you're obviously still really involved in rowing with like the ninth seat and a number of other things. So did that kind of come naturally? Like what was sort of the transition like for you?
Going through three Olympic cycles, I knew from the '04 team and also some of my teammates transitioning after '08, I knew I needed a strategy and it was okay to have a strategy of retiring. I know some athletes, just need focus and they don't have the mental capacity to think about other things afterwards. I took a year off after Beijing and I got a master's degree from UW in intercollegiate athletic leadership. So I thought, okay, if I go back another Olympic cycle, I didn't want to have to then go back to school being 32 back in the day. So I got my master's, which helped me kind of think of like, oh, coaching would be awesome. But then, of course, also while I was there, met the guy who is my husband, who was going to be my husband, and he lives in Mountain Town. So I was like, wait, how am I going to be a rowing coach in a mountain town? He owns his own business. He takes people cat skiing, in the backcountry. And so he's an entrepreneur and going to the IAL program, the Intercollegiate Athletic Leadership Program. There was a part where you had to, solve a problem financially. So I was like, okay, how can I make ninth seat work? How can I be a rowing coach without a team? So yeah, it helped me figure out what would I like to do? How can I coach? How can I do camps? And growing up, loved summer camps. And I also coached summer camps at Mercer while being on the team in Princeton and just kind of knowing like, dude, you have a week with these campers, coxswains, even at camp, like they're paying to be here and they rarely get coached. So then I was like, hey, let's just design a summer camp for coxswains. Coxswains never get the chance to row or to problem solve. How are you supposed to fix technique if they haven't felt it, if they haven't really just like, learned it? And it gives them huge empathy because, like when coxswains complain about rowers never listen to them, well, I always answer, how's your boat maneuverability? Because that gains number one confidence. But then the other thing is when they were or in the rowing seat at camp, there's a lot to do as a rower. Like you're just trying to get your blade in and out, and then you have to match other people, and like it's just chaos, especially when you're learning to row. So it gives them empathy about how to just be simple and clear with their calls. So yeah, so after retiring, created ninth seat, and then have been doing rowing commentary. It's fun. It's terrifying. I hate it, but I love it, if I'm totally honest, because, you forget people are listening. So the whole judging factor. But then I love it because then it just forces me to be a super fan and to stay active. And then when you get to be on the launch and call races, oh, that's the best in the world because you get the best seat in the house, other than the coxswain seat, of course. Like at NCAA's this year was super hard because they gave us a screen pretty much the size of a laptop. And it was very bad. And we're like trying to look at from the finish line. Yeah, it was bad. But the commentary team at NCAA's, there was four of us. It was awesome. It allowed us to really dig into the details and call names and actually try to educate people without forgetting about telling people who's winning and where. So yeah, there's a lot to do. It's fun.
That's awesome. One, I definitely would like to come visit and go skiing with your husband.
Oh yeah.
I think that's awesome. And I think that like the more that we can all learn, obviously a little bit less realistic for all of the rowers to get in a coxswain seat, but like the more we can all learn about the sport and just what it takes to make a crew like in collective successful, I think just makes you a better athlete in general.
For sure. For sure. And I think all my time with the national team, I mean, let's be clear, 90% of it was sitting next to Tom tear heart in the launch, looking at my teammates row small boats, so I'm super fortunate enough to be able to have such a critical eye and to be there in a day in and day out, just knowing the process and just watching rowing and watching the process and listening to coaching and also here and there getting the megaphone, so to speak, from the launch and helping my teammates out. So yeah, it was an easy transition to be a coach. And it's awesome to be a rowing coach without a team because then you get to be the cool guest, and you probably are going to say literally the same thing the coach has said, but it's always different when different energy says the same thing. I love the sport. I love how it brings a common goal of people being present and working together, but the feedback the actual shell gives you and like the feeling of when you are matching and you're doing something at the same time and following through on all the promises and the commitments of just putting the silly blade in and taking it out and the boat propelling, it's such a cool experience and a shared experience. So everyone needs to row. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Yes, I agree 100%. Well, my last question for you is just, do you have any advice or like maybe something to share with me and my teammates, for the upcoming Olympics? Maybe something you wish you had known.
I think the biggest piece of advice for you or any athlete is nothing else really matters about the Olympics. Like it's super cool. It's super fun to be in the village, to get your nails done, to go to the dining hall, to get all the gear. But what is the best thing about the Olympics is that you are ready. You are at the epitome of your training cycle of, your head on straight. Well, hopefully your head on straight. Like your body, like you're in the best shape of your life. But with that said, if you're ever going to feel chaotic, I think the best thing that is going to ground you and keep you to reality is your teammates and your boat, like your physical shell. I would get so many butterflies, before just the hands-on call before you get to warm up. But whenever I would like just touch the boat or whenever I would like sit in my seat, like whenever you're actually doing the motion, that's it. That's the gravity, that's the anchor. You're going to feel nervous and almost laugh about that. It's a privilege, it's awesome. Especially now being away from it, it's laughable how nervous you're going to be. But just know that it's literally one stroke at a time. I don't say that lightly with any ounce of being a cliche. Like it's literally one stroke at a time. And if you can just enjoy the process, that's the best feeling in the world. And so much so that I still am smiling. I still kind of get goosebumps with like, I know how it sounds. I know how it feels. I know those strokes. And it's so good and it's so fun. So enjoy it. Enjoy it because no matter the placement, no matter the expectation, if you truly love the process and how you're going to get to the finish line, not when, but why and how. And if you define your why and your how, and you get to execute that when you have to, results will take care of themselves. But just keep frothing over that why and that how. Like how fast can you go? Stay curious because that curiosity of how fast can we go today, that's going to keep your head on straight versus we better do this, we better defend, we better no. Who cares about everybody else? It's curiosity. How fast can you go? And if you can answer that question among your teammates, magic's going to happen.
We got to bring you in for some pre-race pump up because I'm like ready to go right now.
I know. Let's race. A Cox double. Let's do it. No.
Well, I know I did mention if you have any questions for me, you can definitely ask them.
I do. I have a question for you. What is your most favorite part of the race?
It's funny. I think most people would assume I would say the sprint because I do love sprinting. But I actually think my favorite part of the race, interestingly, is like in the middle when like the racing moment is what my college coach always used to call it. And right, it's not exactly the same in all of the races, but sort of when you make the decision of like, all right, I'm just going to sell my soul right now. Like I was saying, kind of Yosi says, like, we're going to go faster than everybody else. And I think when that decision happens, like that's my favorite part. Almost like you're so in it, you're not thinking about anything else except for literally the stroke you're taking. And I just feel like there's like this freedom in that that's really, really cool. But obviously the end is also fun because then you get to have some water or something.
And then my last question is, in Lucerne, when did you know you winning was possible?
Oh, as soon as we lost our semi.
Can you elaborate?
I think that in our semifinal, we didn't really attack our race plan the way that we should have. And when we finished, it was just sort of like, okay, that wasn't the race that we wanted to have. And so then going into the final, I think I just had a lot of confidence in, well, I mean, I always have a ton of confidence in Sophia. Like I've seen her do some very, very impressive things. And I know that she's like going to give everything she has. So, but it just in our speed and like in our race, I just had this feeling like, yeah, we can have the race that we want to have. And I have confidence that that is going to be faster than the race that anybody else can put forward. And so it's funny, like I've watched the race back and we're like behind for most of the time, but I just sort of had this confidence, like if we're where we need to be coming into the last 500, like no one's going to be able to match our speed. That being said, I do think we need to improve our start a little bit. Definitely still like looking to improve, but it was awesome to, have that result at that race this year.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. I'm excited for you guys to find more speed and that this process, this time, like, the fine tuning time, the special teams time. That's the funnest. So live it up. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. And thank you so much for taking so much time and for all of your awesome answers. It was really awesome.
No problem. I love talking about rowing.
Thank you all for listening, and thank you to Mary for coming on and sharing so much. I really appreciate it, and I just hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. So to end this show this week, I am sharing a quote in honor of the Tour de France starting. Ian actually told me about this, but it is really funny, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should Google it. But as Jens Voigt famously said, when you don't know what to do, you just say, "Shut up, legs." So I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye. I'd love to hear from you. So send us a topic suggestion, or if you'd like to submit a question for our Ask Kristi Anything segment, head to our website, theother3years.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Other 3 Years podcast, part of the Bright Sided Network.